Mr. South Africa,
Sure, how far now?
I do. What's happening now? What's popping?
Hey, what's popping? It's work that is popping. What else can be popping? It's work that has everybody around the world. What's happening now?
Nothing much. So, what time is it in South Africa now?
It's 5:10 early morning.
5:10. Wow. Because when we're setting up this phone call, I was like,
Hmm.
wait, I need to consider this old man. It might be too early for him to wake up.
No, funny enough, I usually wake up early. It's night that is my problem.
Okay.
Early morning, I don't mind. Night is really my problem because I can just sleep off at any time.
That's
Well,
cool.
I usually prefer do most of my work early morning.
Anyways, for
Yeah.
those who don't know this young man or this old man, this is one of my very, very closest friends from University of Lagos, Unilag. And funny story about this man. So after we graduated from college, uni, we set up a team to play football, soccer, and I was the coach in quotes. During training,
Oh,
this guy would never ever do it during training. Ever. But at the tournament, someone just told me that I should just trust this very useless guy. He just told me to not trust this very useless guy. And funny enough, it was my best player for that tournament. Someone just told me to just trust him. And I was happy I did because going by how he trained, nah, I should have benched him. But we thank God.
I never took training seriously then, right? I mean, training for me was just an escape for me, right? So
The same
I
way
never
you never
really
took
took it serious.
classes seriously, and you will
But
pass.
looking back, I wished I would have taken classes more seriously, right?
Uh, but you will still
Yeah, but
pass. Like you are one of those who are deceiving people in your life. Then you will not study
I
or
wasn't.
you come back and still pass. Like
Yeah,
it's
but I
crazy.
wasn't deceiving people. I was just being myself, and people were like, this is a
Follow
serious
you.
person. Yeah, I wasn't deceiving anybody.
Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, we have Dairo Ghalib, Dairo, for this episode. Welcome to Conversations with Win Salah. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very
Introduce yourself.
I mean, you've done all the introduction, right? I mean, it's Ghalib Dairo. I'm currently a cloud and DevOps engineer. That's my workplace. I recently also changed jobs, so basically, I work for Daemon. It's basically a UK company,
Mm-hmm.
but they have um, a branch in South Africa at the moment. So yeah, I work from South Africa basically.
Mm.
Yeah, that's me. I don't know what else you want me to say. I mean, it's just basically work for me mostly.
It's crazy how you ended up in this particular field because you studied computer engineering in like and we are currently doing exactly the same thing, cloud engineering. So tell me, what prompted you to get to this particular or what prompted you to decide to take this journey and to become a cloud engineer?
I would say it's fate and my part, right? I mean, I didn't wake up and say I wanted to become a cloud engineer. I mean, by the time I even started working, we weren't much into cloud engineering at the moment.
Yep.
I actually started as an infrastructure engineer, right, at Standard Bank in Nigeria, right. But we did a lot of virtualization then. I mean, we were basically migrating our applications from physical infrastructure into virtual technology, into virtualization, VMware mostly, right? And if you know cloud very well, virtualization is a precursor to cloud. I mean, virtualization is basically what drives cloud, right?
Yes.
So, yeah, so I did a lot of virtualization. And then a few years after my stint in the banking industry, I went for my master's. And then, when you at master's, you still talking about all this new IT technology. Well, my master's wasn't in computer engineering, right? It was in IT because I had years of experience in IT, and then I just opted to do my master's in information and systems technology. And during that year, we basically talked about big data, cloud, the new buzzwords in technology. And I was like, oh, which one was closest to infrastructure? And it's basically cloud. And that was how I was like, okay, I need to start my part in cloud. And then I did a few certification, Microsoft, and then luckily for me, I got employed as a cloud engineer, and it's been up and up from there in cloud for me.
How many years
Yeah,
experience you have in cloud engineering now?
I think in cloud itself, it's 4, right?
Wow.
It's 4, right?
Mm.
But I always tell people, like, if you're very good with virtualization, if you've done a lot of virtualization, I mean, it counts as cloud technology because
Yes.
basically that's your on-premise cloud
Yeah.
infrastructure, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then people are now doing Terraform with even virtualization technology, VMware and the likes, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it's a very, very good experience or introduction into cloud if you want to go the cloud way, or you do the raw, take all the certification and the courses, and then you basically
Venture
do
into it.
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
That,
So now let's dive into what we came here for. So tell us how cloud engineering contributes to creating tech products. I mean, I know what cloud engineering is all about. I'm a cloud engineer myself. But for those that don't know how you contribute to the picture, so explain to us.
I think these days, cloud in itself is one part of creating tech products that you can never do away with. There is no particular kind of tech products you want to create that doesn't rely on cloud technology in one form or the other, right? Even as basic as saying, I want to host my website on an AC2 instance, right? Which
Yeah.
is basically in the cloud, and then you pay a few bucks for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember speaking with a senior colleague of mine, I'm like, I'm really lucky to start my career in infrastructure because there is no tech product you want to create that doesn't rely on an infrastructure backbone, right? Um, your application must sit somewhere and somebody must manage it,
Yep.
right? Must manage the infrastructure. So in that way, you would say you can't do away with cloud. And because everybody now, we are doing with the upfront, we are doing away with the upfront cost of buying our own server and setting it up, right? We'll
Yep.
basically just go and lease a cloud infrastructure and host our application there, which makes life easier for people to build tech products in itself because you are paying on a monthly basis. And if you know the story of serial techpreneurs or entrepreneurs, right? You can start with product A and end up with product Z, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you fine tune over uh, a couple of you fine tune the products to what you want to sell to where you create the demand for the product for, right? So in that particular instance, right, you would say cloud itself, it would be the driver of new products in the future, and that's where people are building tech product in itself, coming from regular your mobile application or what you call like an enterprise application or big data or massive data warehousing, right?
Mm.
Everything now is driven by cloud technology because we've unconsciously we've all agreed that it is better to leave that part of managing infrastructure to the big boys that have the money to set it up on a massive scale so that you can now lower the cost, the infrastructure cost that houses your application. So I mean, it's just it's interesting the way we use cloud nowadays in unexpected ways, to be honest.
Okay. So in very, very layman terms, can you tell us what cloud engineering is?
In layman terms, I mean, cloud engineering is just finding innovative ways, right, of using existing abstracted technology, right? Because cloud it's an abstraction in a particular kind of way because For example, for me to set up a server, I don't have to be a core IT person, right? It's that simple as using a Facebook, right? So your cloud engineering is finding innovative ways of actually leveraging the technologies that already exist in the cloud and using that to building scalable and fault tolerant products, right? Um, in layman terms, I don't know if that is
See this
so
man.
later
You're
for
giving,
you, right?
you're giving AWS and Azure answers. Mr.
And
Man,
then funny enough,
tell
I'm not giving.
us. That's no that scalable, abstract, all those things we know.
Okay, so in layman terms, basically, your cloud engineering is basically creating your infrastructure, right? And managing that infrastructure so that it can support your application. That's basically what we do in cloud engineering. And then we now basically use the technology that already exists in the cloud service provider platform. And by cloud service provider platform, I'm talking of a Microsoft or Amazon that hosts AWS and Microsoft that has the Azure platform,
Azure
right?
platform.
And yeah, and
Or
so in that,
Google Cloud.
or Google Cloud, right? In fact, there are a lot of cloud now, right?
Yep.
That I mean, there's Huawei Cloud, there's DigitalOcean,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there are a lot of them, right? And so basically, the engineering part is basically using those technology to build a product or to support your enterprise infrastructure, right? And that's how later it could be. It's just using what already exists in the cloud and taking advantage and taking their advantages and using it to build something nice for your customer that
Say
they can
nice.
use. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you?
Wow. I mean, a typical day in my journey in cloud. I mean, don't forget that I also do some form of DevOps beside cloud, right?
Okay.
So a typical day for me, right, would be if I'm not setting up infrastructure for a new product from the scratch, right, it will be managing infrastructure that already exists and ensure that we have our uptime at 5 nines, which we call 5 nines, 99.999%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a typical day for me is to ensure that, and because you've set up your cloud in a way that you get a lot of alerts, right? So a typical day for me is first to check that, okay, all my infrastructures else, they are green, right? Because if it's green, then the application that runs on those infrastructure are working perfectly. If it's red, we find a way to quickly resolve it. Part of my day would also involve liaising with the developers, right, to find the best way of continuously deploying the application, which we call your CI and CD in DevOps, right?
CI/CD.
Because you now have to take care of the application from when the developers commit the code in the repository to when it finally gets containerized and gets deployed, or even if it's bare metal server, which a lot of people don't believe that we still deploy application on bare metal
Bare
server.
metal, yeah. People don't do
Everybody
that. They
still,
don't understand
everybody,
that.
yeah, everybody believes it's now containerized, which is a big lie, right? Sometimes you deploy application on bare metal, right? Part of that would also involve managing like a Kubernetes cluster, right? Because nowadays we need an orchestration tool for our containers. Part of that would also doing some terraforming. I mean, Terraform is infrastructure as code,
That's
right?
good, yeah.
So, and I mean, the power of Terraform. But Terraform is a beautiful tool, right? I mean, I started Terraform last year, right? So,
Sweet.
but it's I mean, it's a beautiful tool if you are good with that. And I always tell people that I ran away from coding for a very long time, and now I'm back to
Yep.
coding infrastructure, basically, right? And apart from that, part of it would also then be application support, because there is this term in IT that if it's broken down, if it's not working, blame the infrastructure guy, right? Even when the issue is not related to infrastructure. So a lot of time, I found that in my day, I'm trying to explain to people why an issue is not an infrastructure issue, why we should look at applications and stuff. But if you're a customer-focused person, you also cannot just say, it's not my issue. You have to find a way to collaborate and resolve the issue, because at the end of the day, everybody is working to serve the customer, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's a typical day for me, right? I mean,
Okay.
terraforming, cloud engineering, DevOps, and application support,
Okay.
basically.
So let's quickly switch to the other side of this episode, system support. Because I know cloud engineering is under system support, and I think what I should have asked you from the beginning is, how do you support tech products to functioning properly as a system engineer?
I
That's where
mean, by
DevOps come to
support,
play.
how do I support it? Right. My support basically, right? Let me go from maybe the required knowledge to adequately support tech products. I don't know if that would answer your question, right? To really support a tech product, right? You need have to have good knowledge of your domain, right? And for me, that's cloud and infrastructure. And then you need to have an overview knowledge of other domains, right? Things like networking, things like application. So, for example, if you are going to deploy a node application, you need to do npm install and stuff like that. You also need to be able to interpret what your developer is telling you into how they've architected the application to function in production, right? So all of that would help you in trying to support a product, right? Even from when you initially deploy it to when you continually support or upgrade that application, right? I mean, so good knowledge of your domain. So for me in cloud, I continually upskill myself. I'm sure you know from all my LinkedIn interaction, right?
Yes.
To have deep knowledge of cloud to continually, I mean, because having the certification is not enough, right? It's what you do every day. It's the experience. I
Yes.
mean, that helps you eventually. That builds your capability and eventually makes it easy for you to support whatever system you're supporting. So I would say what helps me in support is continually upskilling myself, finding how to gaining new knowledge, whether it's in cloud engineering or it's in other domain like security or in DevOps and stuff like that, right? And you know, the world of IT, it's ever evolving, right? Even
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I'm just tired of the amount of evolution we have in IT. But I mean, it's one field that if you are somebody that has a test for knowledge to learn new things, you would never be bored in IT because there is one more thing somebody have developed that you need to learn and incorporate into your own environment to make your life easier. But
Okay.
one key principle I always hold there is make it simple. Make it is to make whatever solution or whatever solution you're supporting, make it simple to support. Because if it's simple, then it's easier for other people that are collaborating to support that tech product to
Mm.
understand what has been done and then to be able to carry on from there, basically.
Okay. So I mean, this is a field I'm familiar with. How do you administer and resolve conflicts? I'll give an example. Say an alarm comes up and maybe a particular part of that tech product is faulty, and the client or customers are complaining. How do you tell the software engineer or the product owners to make them see and reason with you while what they are doing is not working?
Yeah, I mean that's a very good question, right? One key part of support that maybe I've not mentioned since we started our conversation is logging, right? For any application you deploy, for any infrastructure you're monitoring, there is a log that sits somewhere that basically tells you what is going on in the application. And when there
Mm-hmm.
is a breakdown, right? Except it's a breakdown you're familiar with, the first point of call is to go check the logs, right?
Yep.
Because the logs will tell you, it's like a patient telling a doctor, this is what is wrong with me, this is how I'm feeling, right? How I'm feeling would eventually lead the doctor to diagnose me to say, oh, you have XYZ infection or whatever, right? Same way your application or your infrastructure will talk to you. It will say, I'm trying to do this. Maybe I'm trying to make an API call, right? And then I can't make the API call. And then you start investigating what are the technologies that would be needed to make an API call. Of course, the networking must be fine, right? The downstream application must be opening to receiving an API call, right? And so that's how you start your investigation. So the logs tells us what the client was trying to do at a particular time, and that leads us to the possible issues that might happen. And from that, you can be able to tell your application support guy that, okay, this is what is trying to happen. And then this is where I think we should start our investigation. And then everybody comes together and just trace the issue, find the root cause of the issue, and then resolve the issue. So I would say logging is very, very important. And you would have, and that is also dependent on how we've built the application. If your application developer is very, very techy and follows the global standard, right, you will find that the logging mechanism of the application is good enough to help you diagnose what is wrong with the application at any point in time.
Okay. So let's move on. What are the tools that you use or that you use every day to be able to support and do your work in the cloud?
I'll say the first and most important tool is the cloud portal itself, right? All your cloud service provider, they have a portal which is like your google.com that you can go to and look at the services that you are using, right? That's one tool that is very key. Another tool you would use, because now a lot of us run application in the Linux environment, right?
Yep.
We use like a secure shell terminal mostly to connect to our servers, right? So that's one to you. So your Linux skills is something that is very, very key when you're trying to move into cloud. And then your terminal is one tool that you will use every day. Right. If you are somebody that also manage databases, you will be using some database clients to connect to your database. You'll be using some monitoring tool like a Prometheus, right? Or if you prefer to use a cloud provider tool, like you're using CloudWatch for AWS to monitor your application, that is something you would use every day to monitor the health of your application. Lastly, I mean, that's just a few, but one important tool you can never do away with is google.com, right? I mean, we all go to Google every day to understand an issue, because I find that there is practically no issue I would face in my everyday life now that has not been faced somewhere else
By somebody else.
and
Yeah.
somebody else, and then you would probably get a pointer to the answer on a forum, right? Stack Overflow or something. Yeah, so I think, yeah, majorly, those are the tools that I can't do without every day. Of course, there are other tools like a Confluence for documentation that we use to document
Yeah.
our process and procedures. I mean, there is Jira where you pick up tasks for the day, or then you can have your login
Logins.
application
Yeah.
where people log tickets for you to pick up and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but I mean, so those are the kind of tools you would work with on a daily basis as a cloud engineer, to mention
Yeah.
a few.
My other friend Martins in the previous episode, he also made mention of Google, because that was about the software engineering part of this season. So Google is your
Oh,
friend. So
is your friend?
yeah, what question would someone what question will you ask someone trying to get into support slash cloud engineering that will convince you to say, okay, this person is proficient, or the person understands support and cloud engineering?
I mean, in terms of support, like your general knowledge about networking, application support, databases, even just understanding the principles of relational databasing, database, right? Um, Understanding the OSI layer, things at a very, very academic level. You should have good understanding of those things, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
how do you then troubleshoot an application? At which layer is as an application broken down, right? Is it at the application level of the OSI layer, or at the network level, or you understand, right? So to even have an academic knowledge of those things would help you in support. Of course, in networking, you want to have knowledge of subnetting and routing at the LAN layer, right? Not one, because you're not a network expert and you're not trying to be like a CCIE guy, right?
Right.
But you should understand local area networking to a
Routing,
certain extent, routing, switching, and all of those things, right? You should understand databases at least to a certain level, right? Because I mean, data will sit somewhere, right? And then you would host the infrastructure that housed the database. So you should also understand that at a very, very good level, right? But when you now get to a more senior level, right, you want to understand what we call your application architecture, right? How does the different layers of the application start talking to each other, right? And these days we basically talk about the 3-layer architecture: the front end, the middle layer, and the back end, right? So when you go to an interview, or when you're attending an interview, those are the kind of questions they would expect you to be able to understand, right? And then to be able to, so a typical question in a cloud engineering would be, oh, I have this 3-layered architecture. Please tell me how I would deploy this architecture, this application in a cloud environment. Explain your guiding principles and your decision-making process, right? So you go like, oh, I need to first deploy the database in a secure subnet, where the only thing that would have access to it is your middle layer. And then you start explaining why that is important, because it's a database that houses records, and if it's in a financial institution, then you want restricted access and all of those things. You start talking about the ports networking, how you need to open the application on 443 and not 80, right?
18.
I mean, so yeah, I mean, not to go into the techie, so that people listening would understand, right? So you need to, and again, in infrastructure, you need to have, like I said earlier during our discussion, broad knowledge of other areas is very important too. Like, I wouldn't have been able to interact with my developers if I'd not done coding at some level in my undergrad or postgrad days, right? Because I can basically pick up, like, what do we call it now? I can
Python.
basically, I mean, if you throw me a Python application, I can read it and understand what is going on, right? I might not be able to write it from scratch. So to that level, sometimes we get on a call with our developers and we start going through codes line by line just to debug where the issue is. So yeah, I would say have good programming skills, to average programming skills too, right? Because I mean, what do we do in Terraform these days? We are basically writing codes to deploy infrastructure, calling module, which is what you call your objects and classes and objects instantiation in your core programming. I mean, you even did more programming than myself. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, I'd say so. Some knowledge of, and in DevOps these days, they actually prefer people from a software development background to some of us coming from the infrastructure background, right? So, and because in software you've done a lot of development, and what we are doing in DevOps is writing a lot of scripts, right?
Scripts, yeah,
so,
a lot of scripting.
Yeah. So I'd say scripting too. I mean, talking about what I do every day, we write scripts too, right? And scripting too is a very, very good skill to have in cloud engineering.
Yeah. I wonder how we forgot scripting, because everything you do is scripting, automation. You're automating the processes so that you don't have to, like, because a lot of repetitive tasks every day. So you don't want to be doing that manually. You just want to have it running in the background. So yes,
exactly.
Yeah. So this question is not a curveball, but you should be expecting this question. Explain what you do to a 7-year-old.
There's
a prize for it. So answer it well.
So to a 7-year-old, right? I would say I think this is the hardest question I've faced in my career. So to a 7-year-old, right? What does a 7-year-old do? They basically play games on iPads and stuff, right? So I would say for a part of my work, would involve working with the people that developed the game that you are playing, right? We basically work together to develop that game that you enjoy, and then to also to I think that's the best way I can explain my job to a 7-year old, right? Is to be able to key into one of the activities, which is gaming a lot on iPads, right? So I would say, yeah, I work with somebody that developed your application and other application that you've used in the past, like a Facebook. I would say, for example, when you go to a facebook.com, right? Part of my work is ensuring that you actually get to facebook.com, which is the networking part and hosting the application part. So I would say in that sense, that's the kind of work I do basically.
Uh-huh.
I don't,
Okay, I will not help you. Anyway, so just to finish up this episode. So how is life in South Africa now? How is it different from how is the I would say corporate culture different from the one we all came from in Nigeria?
um, yeah, it's I mean, okay, so maybe I'm not the best question to the person to answer this question, right? Because the culture I was involved with in Nigeria, I mean, I worked with Standard Bank and Accenture. It's a very, very um, laid back culture. Let me put that. Not the culture we know in Nigeria where you are doing yes sir and yes ma here and
Ah,
there, right? So even at Stanbic, which is Stanbic, a lot of people with Stanbic and Accenture in Nigeria, I can call my CEO by name, right? I can basically walk into my CEO office and call them by name. And by doing that, you basically lower that invisible wall that makes you
mm,
think this person is high up there, whereas the person is open to listening to you, right? So I would say in that sense, right? The culture of where I worked in Nigeria and where I'm working currently, they're basically the same in that sense. The part that I now enjoy now is the informal way of dressing, right?
ah, mm,
So you basically go with your jeans and shirts, t-shirts and stuff, right? I mean, even a friend of mine can he works in a place where you can basically wear like an armless top, a shorts and a slippers to work, right?
wow,
So I would say that kind of, and that's on a Monday morning. It's not a Friday thing. You can go to
wow,
work like that on a Monday morning, right? So I would say to that extent, your comfortability at work, it's very, very key to them here, right? And so nobody really cares about how you're dressed, or it's your output that they are majorly concerned about, right?
mm,
So I would say to that extent, yeah. I mean, but because in Nigeria now you have a lot of tech startups too, right?
tech
So if you work in a
bros.
tech, yeah, if you work in that kind of startup, I don't expect them to tell you to be coming with a suit and tie to work, right? I would
Mm,
expect it's also informal in that kind of way. And generally, I think everybody's evolving, except you work in a financial institution where you want to look prim and proper. I think what you wear doesn't really concern people these days. It's about what you can
can do.
give in terms of your output, right?
Mm,
That's really more important. So, and in that sense, I think the work culture would be fairly the same to where I'm coming from in
from
Nigeria.
in Nigeria. Okay, okay, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So how far now? When am I coming to come and eat rice now to the ballet? Abi, are you married now? Because we don't know what you are doing.
Maybe I should be asking you when you are married, if you are married now. Right.
Invite us to South Africa. Oh. We we'll come
Finish
and
it.
visit. Invite
Yeah,
us.
why not? So why not? I mean,
All
we
right.
would invite you. Yeah. But I mean, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I mean, it's been a while we talked, right? Apart
It's been
from
a while on LinkedIn.
okay.
Imagine us connecting on LinkedIn. And this man has packed all the certifications, all the cloud certifications. He has packed
I've not even
everything.
packed anything. I'm even like I'm at level 4 when you compare my cloud CV to other people, right? I
Ah,
mean, but the important thing, like I tell people, is not certification, it's the knowledge. Because imagine me having 10 cloud certification and I can't defend it, right?
mm,
I mean,
mm.
because certifications are like writing exams too, you can read to pass,
But you have
right?
to have practical knowledge.
Yeah, but practical knowledge is very, very important, because how do you go and explain to a prospective recruiter that I have all the certification and you can't tell me what the basic of a compute is on AWS, your security groups, your EC2 instances,
Yeah,
and
it's
all
easy
of those
stances.
things,
Yeah.
and you can't explain it, right?
Mm.
You'd look stupid. Yeah.
Mm.
So I mean, so for me, I pace myself when I know people that wrote 8 AWS certification in 1 year, right?
Ah,
Uh so
it's
for
crazy.
me, I'm still going at an average of 2 certifications per year, right? And that's because I like to tie my certifications into my knowledge
Oh,
in
okay. At the at that current period.
yeah, you
Mm.
understand, and that works for me. Whatever works for, I wouldn't tell anybody this is how you grow in cloud, right? In your cloud career, but it is important to match your paper skill, what you put in your CV, to what you have upstairs, and
Mm.
that would distinguish you from any other candidates, basically.
Anyways, we have come to the end of this episode. Thank you, Galib, for showing up. Um, hopefully, we'll catch up often, and hopefully,
Yeah,
we invite us to South Africa to come
I
and
would.
celebrate your wedding.
No
Anyways,
problem.
yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, thank you for having me on the podcast,
No
and
problem.
you're doing a good job in trying to document or to write the story in the proper way.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right. Have a good one.
You too.